Again, for the public, we've just come, this is a special meeting of council with closed session. It's Wednesday, July the 13th. It is a hybrid meeting, which means most of us are in chamber for the first time since in about 2 years. It's a bit strange, but welcome. And some are still communicating via Zoom, as are most of you. So I've called the meeting to order, and I'm going to read the land acknowledgement, which is that the town of Midland recognizes it is located on land which is the traditional and treaty territory of the Anishinaabe people, now known as the Chippewa Tribe Council, comprised of Bosley First Nation, Rama First Nation, and the Georgina Island First Nation. This territory is within the Pre-Confederation Treaty 5 and Treaty 16, and included within the Williams Treaties of 1923. The town of Midland recognizes that it is located on land which is the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and the historic homelands of the Métis, and that our town is home to a large and diverse community of Indigenous peoples. Thank you, and I would ask you now to just join me in a moment of silence, reflection. Thank you very much. I'd point out to residents who are joining us that, as I say, we're now in council chambers, all senior staff and most of council. And I'll ask council whether they have any declarations of conflict of interest with respect to the proceedings this evening. Not seeing any, then I have motions arising from our closed session, moved by Councilor Cunningham, seconded by Deputy Mayor Ross. The council receive as information and confirm the directions as outlined in the verbal report provided by the Manager of Planning Services at the closed meeting session of the Special Council held July 13th, 2022, respecting the Ontario Land Tribunal appeal and the zoning bylaw amendment at 651 Yonge Street. Council, you've heard the motion. Comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor then? Thank you, that carries. Next, we have a motion to approve the agenda. It's moved by Councilor Gordon, seconded by Councilor Shevsky, that the contents of the special meeting of council with closed session agenda for July 13th, 2022 be approved. That is, be approved. As amended, with the exception of removal of item 10.2 CSR-2022-47, zoning bylaw amendment removal of holding H symbol for 219 Queen Street, and item 11.1 bylaw 2022-40, a bylaw to amend the zoning bylaw 2004-90 as amended for the removal of the holding symbol on 219 Queen Street. Questions or comments with respect to the agenda? Deputy Mayor Ross.
Thank you, Worship. Will that item come back, or just curious why it was pulled?
My understanding it was pulled for non-compliance on the.
Okay, thank you.
I imagine it will come back at some point. Council, you've heard the question then. All those in favor? Thank you. That also carries. Moving into report, section 10, first item 10.1, Terry Fox Run, correspondence dated July 5th, 2022, requesting the waiving of fees for the NSSRC Community Hall on August the 30th. I have a motion with this regarding this matter moved by Councilor Shevsky, seconded by Councilor Gordon. That council receives the request from Don Chapman on behalf of the Terry Fox Foundation dated July 5th, 2022 for a waiving of rental fee for the NSSRC Community Hall, and the council approves paying the rental fee at the NSSRC Community Hall on August 30th 2022 for the Terry Fox Foundation event from Council's administration budget. Comments or questions with respect to the motion? Councilor Main.
Thank you. I think this is great. We all know how hard Don Chapman and his team work. I'm just curious, what's the council's administrative budget? This is a thing I'm not familiar with. Is this a small fund to support these types of initiatives? Thank you.
Mr. Dodon.
I'll defer that to our CFO.
Thank you, Councillor Main, through your worship. That would be the overall council budget. There are various line items. That's a term administrative budget, but there would be a line that we would take that from. It's a nominal amount, and so you'll definitely find room for that.
Thank you. Any further questions on that matter? It's given that Councillor Main is somewhat mystified by this particular budget item, perhaps we might get an informal explanation afterwards as how we might access that budget. Mr. Campbell.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, council doesn't have a line item for these sorts of things. So this would just become out of the under expenditure of council by not using fees that or expenses for conferences and things like that. So there is no line item per se for this. It's just council will be choosing not to go to a conference or something else like that. So it's looking at the under expenditures of the council budget. So
by the council rather limiting training, Terry Fox is able to be on the move again.
Yeah, this is likely a $250 range to $500 range. So as the CFO said, it's nominal amount, and there is some under expenditures in the council budget currently.
Thank you for that clarity. So council, you've heard the question. All those in favor? Thank you. That passes. 10.2 is withdrawn from the agenda, that being the removal of the holding symbol. We'll move to 10.3, which is performance review process. This is a staff report, CSR-2022-49 regarding CAO performance review. And I believe that the manager of HR will be speaking to this, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just one moment, please. The report that was submitted was to review the process for the CAO performance review, and I've also prepared an overview of that process and a quick overview of how to perform a performance review for those that have not done so before. So we'll go over what the performance relationship is between the CAO and mayor and council, why the performance reviews are important, who will be involved, the how and when in establishing those roles in that process, how to evaluate and provide the feedback, and what the next steps shall be. The performance relationship is very important between the CAO and mayor and council, as the CAO is the administrative head of the municipality. So the CAO himself ensures policies and programs are implemented, advises and informs mayor and council about the operation and the affairs of the municipality, and carries out the duties described in legislation. Mayor and council rely on the CAO to be that connecting link between council and the municipal operations. So it's important that we have the performance review at this point, as it provides the CAO, the mayor and council with a record of performance conversation and appraisals. It also reflects on the agreed upon goals and the achievement of those goals. Ultimately, it evaluates, it's a prime opportunity for organizational feedback, recognizes the challenges that the CAO may have faced throughout the period. It also allows officials to hear about the CAO's managerial side from the CAO's direct reports and internal staff, and encourages appreciation for the need for succession planning and discuss and clarify for the future. The benefits of performing a performance review for the CAO, council can predetermine performance criteria related to the town's direction and priorities. It allows the CAO to be evaluated on organizational goals and accomplishments, enables the CAO to give staff clear directions for their work and performance, identifies opportunities, challenges, and strategic issues that council and the CAO can address before those problems arise, and building a collaborative working relationship between the CAO and council. So in the proposal, the mayor and council will be involved, as will direct reports, the CAO's direct reports right now, nor Simcoe's CAOs, which our CAO works regularly with, and the Midland Library CEO. So there'll be two different processes in that sense, that the direct reports, the Northern CAOs and the Midland Library CEO, they will complete an online open 360, of which the sample report has been provided in your package. And mayor, deputy mayor, council, and CAO, they will complete the performance review form, of which the manager of human resources will reconcile all the results from both areas and present a formal report back to council. So all this is related in the staff report that's been submitted, and 2022-49. So I ask that we review and approve the review process and review the objectives and the competencies to be evaluated. And these objectives and competencies are provided based on the 100-day plan as amended and the leadership competencies that came from the CAO recruitment 2 years ago. The participants for the Open 360 have been identified in that report as well. And the process itself will determine how to gather and assess the data from the members and determine who the chair will review, have the discussion with the CAO. They will also establish the timelines and ultimately prepare for completing a performance evaluation for the CAO. So as you can see here, there is a timeline of the review process. As the manager of HR, I'll be owning the back end piece of it and facilitating everything. So it will start with the presentation of the process and clarifying what that looks like. So as you can see, that is today. From here, I will circulate the performance review form to the CAO, and he will complete his own self-assessment, and there's a time frame attached for that for him to submit it back. During that period, there will also be the Open 360 circulated online. When I have the self-assessment back from the CAO, then I will share that with the members of council, so you can see what the CAO has reflected on his own objectives and competencies, and then you will be asked to complete the form yourself and submit the results back to me directly. I will then reconcile all the feedback and create an evaluation report. The evaluation report would then be circulated back to mayor, council, and the CAO. The mayor and deputy mayor will then present the evaluation to the CAO with the assistance of myself, and the town clerk will be there as well. That will be an open conversation. So if there's anything that needs to be revised in the final report based on conversation at that time, then I would revise the report and recirculate it. And from there, we'll leave it to new council to meet with the CAO to establish new priorities, goals, and look at the next steps from there. And then I also recommend that we have this ongoing performance dialogue between mayor, council, and the CAO over the next, I'm hoping to have this process biannually, so that dialogue would be ongoing and would align with the mid and end of each council term. So for those of you who have not prepared a performance review previously, some of the points that you may want to emphasize are recognizing the CAO's accomplishments, building on the CAO's strong points, improving the CAO's performance by identifying areas for growth and development, and making some suggestions on plans on how to support this, and establishing new performance goals for the organization and the CAO Given we're coming to the end of the council term, I recommend that there may be some suggested performance goals in that sense for new council to consider. When providing feedback in general, the earlier the better. Obviously, we're talking about a 2-year process at this point. So this is also a tip for moving forward. If the feedback doesn't come in a timely manner, it's difficult to sometimes tie that back to an annual performance review period. It's also important during this period to give the positive and constructive feedback in writing. You don't want to necessarily use it as a delivery to vent. You want to accentuate the positive. If there is a constructive comment, there should be a positive outcome. What is that positive outcome? What is that desired result? Ask how the problem originated. It helps get to the root of the problem. Once we get to the root, we're able to identify either ways to shift goals or approach it from a different perspective. And ultimately, the CAO, mayor, and council should be involved in that solution. When providing positive feedback, it's also equally important to be fair and realistic. It's important to have that constructive, positive feedback as well as negative, constructive feedback. And I don't know if anyone's taken notes throughout the years, but I ask that you reflect on any notes that you have taken. And if you have not taken notes, please start doing so for future performance reviews. I've included a sample of the performance review form, just for your knowledge here. If you could just flip through those for me. So they do include some rating definitions for clarity. And I just want to highlight that if there is an item that's left blank, it will be interpreted as a ranking of 2, which equals proficient. So it is important that you rank every response. This is just a blank form here. So where it says objective number 1 or objective number 2, I will be inputting the objectives that are based on the report into those areas. And you will be asked to mark the exceeds, proficient, requires development, or unsatisfactory at that point. And you will also have the CAO's comments based on their self-evaluation in that process. And then you will be able to make your own evaluator comments as well on each area. I think we lost it. There was a little bit more on that. I don't know. Okay, next page. Can you go back to the PowerPoint? Sorry, I'm just going to pull up my version here. My apologies. I know. So the next slide, and I'll just verbally go over the remainder of the presentation. So there are some performance measures to consider, things like efficiency, effectiveness, input, outcome, and customer service. Mayor and Council, you do have copies of the presentation attached in your report. So for the performance review discussion, I have some additional tips on how to plan for that meeting, how to discuss what the overall ratings were, how the performance aligned with the council's strategic goals, to explore possible reasons why those goals or expectations were not met, and establishing the goals for the next period as well. So for next steps, with the approval of the report, I will begin circulating the documents for review. So the review form, the online 360, and I also have a performance management guide that I will be circulating. The CAO will complete a self-assessment. I will then collect everything and put together the report that will be circulated before we have the performance meeting. And then if any adjustments are required, I'll make the adjustments before we circulate the final and signed evaluation. in the presentation, there's some tips as well about the ongoing feedback for continued performance dialogue. The continued performance dialogue really aligns with the performance program that we'll be implementing internally and the different integrated performance dialogue mentality and program that it's great to have this align with our process here. Okay. And there's also some tips on establishing the new goals. And then finally, after this entire process, I will circulate a post-review survey just to see what went well, what can we do better next time, and evaluate the process to see if any adjustments need to be made beforehand for the next session. So I do ask that any questions or comments about filling out the form be directed to me personally, and I can give you some individual guidance on how to complete a performance evaluation if there's specific examples that you want to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you. The council, any questions for Ms. Van de Beek? And I would remind you, this is about process, not about the incumbent. So please limit your comments or questions to the process itself. Councilor Gordon.
Want this one?
No worries. We're stretching around here with mics. I had a quick question about the 360 and asking his peers, our North Simcoe CAOs, to provide feedback on them. Is that something that our CAO does, you know, for Tiny and Tay and Pen and Tang machine CAOs, or is this something unique that, and I'm not disagreeing with the concept, I don't want us to be the first and all of a sudden put our CAO in the position of being evaluated by his peers if we don't reciprocate. And another question while I got you then is, do our lower level staff, so other than executive directors, so our frontline, the core beating heart of our staff, do they get to participate in this? And if so, how is their identity protected so that they, you know, don't feel like, you know, they're able to give more candid feedback? And so those are my two sort of observations about the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon, through you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of the local municipalities, some are using 360 in various strengths. So I do think we will be a bit of a trend center in this. It's because it's an online tool, it's quite easy to complete. And I think it's a great way for us to get their feedback, even if we are the trend centers. But I'm open to an amendment on that process if that's what council and mayor so desires. And sorry, could you repeat the second part of that?
Oh, there we are. Fair enough. I mean, I don't have any issue with it. I think it's a novel approach. I just want to make sure that the CAO is comfortable with that. I know I'm putting them on the spot here right now, but as long as I'm getting some nods, so that's cool. Good enough. The other question was about our staff. You know, the non-executive direct reports to the CAO. How, you know, at liberty are they going to feel to provide feedback, assuming they are all allowed to, you know, right down to this students, presumably, that, you know, help cut grass and what have you. Is everyone going to be involved in this evaluation, or is it expected to funnel up through their managers to the EDs?
Thank you for the clarity. I wasn't planning at this point to send the Open 360 to all staff, all the direct reports and some middle managers, as those are the ones that are regularly interacting with the CAO. If we were to send it to all staff, the results would be quite diverse, and I don't believe they would be as reliable. It's better to typically narrow down these results down to people that are regularly interacting with the individual. I can certainly expand that parameter and include a few other lines of staff just for comparison purposes. Again, because the tool is online, it's a very easy tool for me to distribute that way.
Satisfied, Councilor? Thank you. Any other questions or comments from Ms. Van de Beek? It's quite thorough, actually. Quite, yeah, excellent. Thank you. So with that, Council, I do have a motion moved by Councilor Main, seconded by Councilor McGinn. The staff report CSR-2022-49 CAO performance review process dated July 13th, 2022 be received, and that Council approve the process as outlined in staff report CSR-2022-49. Council, you've heard the motion. All those in, sorry, I guess first of all, any further comments or questions? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Thank you. That motion carries as well. We now move on to item 10.4, which is the parking system update. I think as a matter of practicality, I'm going to suggest that we split this motion into its constituent elements so that we can deal with them in a concise way. I'll read the entire original motion into the record, and then we'll see how each, I'm going to suggest we deal with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6 in this as separate matters embodied within the full resolution. So with that, I have a motion moved by Deputy Mayor Ross, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. The staff report CSR-2022-48 parking system update, July 13th, 2022 be received. And 1, that Council approves parking system update option 1, which subject to further detail described in report CSR-2022-48, provides parking revenues that will generate moderate tax relief. A, free parking 7 days per week within all downtown parking lots, including the harbor, free parking in December, free resident parking at Pete Peterson Boat Launch, paid on-street parking 6 days per week at the current rate of $1 per hour, increase the harbor rate to $1.50 per hour, expand paid parking to Bayshore Drive, seasonal boat slip parking passes at the harbor at the rate of $99 per season effective 2023, and 2, then in accordance with the evaluation, with the evaluation and implementation details, tongue-tied here. That in conjunction with approval of the related parking system updates, Council choose one of the following options, that in accordance with the evaluation and implementation details set out in report CSR-2022-48, the pay-by-plate system be converted to a pay and display system, or, and in accordance with the evaluation in accordance with the evaluation details set out in report CSR-2022-48, the pay-by-plate system be retained. 3, the current pause on paid parking remain in effect until September 15th, 2022, until all changes can be implemented and communicated to the public. And 4, the staff be directed to cover the estimated lost parking revenue of approximately $260,000 during the paid parking pause from June the 15th to September 15th through any available relief funding and or a draw on reserves as recommended in the 2022 year-end report. And 5, that staff continue to evaluate the ability to generate event-based revenues through paid parking that would result in a benefit to tax relief. And 6, the staff be directed to provide an update to Council on the program in September of 2023. Now that's the entire recommendation as currently written. As we go through this, the motions that arise will default to Deputy Mayor Ross as the mover and seconded by Councillor Cunningham. So with that, let's deal with item 1. Comments or questions with respect to item 1 in the report. Councillor Gordon.
Thanks. This kind of applies to, I think, everything. The one area in here that I don't see us addressing is the display readability problems. Whether it's because some of these are facing the western exposure, or there's just they're just difficult to read. When I've compared these displays with the ones in Tiny, because they've got them now for their pay and display, or the ones that are littered all over Barrie that I use routinely, they are the same. They appear to me to be the same displays. So it doesn't look like Midland got the bargain display or the non-standard display. So I think it's just the lack of shade or, maybe our positioning. Have we done any type of audit to see where we can realign the machines to make them more visible during regular daylight hours where there's sunlight? Because that's an issue that a lot of people have expressed concerns with, that they just can't read the display. So I didn't see that in here. And the second thing was, I'm hoping that the system change, and hopefully we adopt the option A there, where we get rid of the parking plate or the plate entry. I'm hoping that this configuration is going to work the way I experience it in Barrie, which is I walk up to it, pull a loonie out of my pocket. Sometimes I use my card, but drop a loonie in, press the print button. I know the time I'm getting for the buck. Out comes the ticket, and I walk away, and the whole transaction happens in seconds. And within 30 seconds, I'm done at this machine without having to make options and choose things. If I put in $2 and I just max my time, out it comes and it prints on the ticket how long I've got until I need to revisit that machine. Is that the plan for the system, to make it, really simple? Walk up, drop in your coin if you choose to go that way, press the print button, and out comes a ticket. Has anyone sort of piloted what this change is going to look and feel like?
I'd like to handle that. Mr. Dunham.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councilor Gordon. Yes, certainly the intent of this recommendation that we've brought back was intended to really focus on making the program simple. That was certainly something that we heard from the last session, was let's try and keep this as simple as possible. We've obviously benefited from a tremendous amount of feedback we've received from the public, from literally all of council, from the BIA and the chamber on the program, as well as individuals who've called into our CXO line. And some of them obviously don't like to use the system. Some of them have no issues with the system. Some of them are concerned about tax relief. But I think what was consistent was, let's keep this as simple as possible. So that's what the recommendation is really focused around. The element of the sun, that's certainly something we've heard about. So we're investigating, are there additional filters, screen filters we can put on them to deal with the sun glare? You're right, Councilor Gordon, this wasn't the cheap version. This is the same machine that is being used in all the other jurisdictions. But are there potential options, because of the way some of our machines are situated, that we can make them easier to read? So once we determine how many machines we'll have, we'll determine what remediation we can do on those machines. But that is certainly part of it. The other aspect is we're introducing, obviously, the technology to avoid going to the machines altogether. So if you want to use an app, you can go to the app and never go to the machine. Never have to deal with the sunlight shining in your eyes unless it's on your mobile phone. So those are the other aspects that we're looking for, but certainly simplicity, understanding what is free and what is not free. We think we've made as simple as possible. We feel confident that with a lot of the financial strategies that this council's taken, we feel confident that this option we've put forward is one that we can take the risk on in terms of the loss of revenue with a normal program. We've made a lot of headway, we think, on the financial side with a lot of the things that we've done at the town, but there's still headwinds. We all know that. The inflation rate is very high. We've got lots of labor unions with bargaining coming up for the town. So we do have to position ourselves to take care of that. That's why there's a balanced approach here of some pay, but most of the spots will be free in the downtown.
Councilor Gore.
Thanks for that. The key for me, I guess my favorite word, compromise, really rings true in this report and these options. And as soon as I got them, I was hoping it was going to look something like this. I know the CAO and I have had some dialogue about it ahead of time, where I sent in my top 10. It wasn't my top 10, but it was just stuff I've curated. He obviously had all the same feedback come through the office here in the CXO. So that's good. We're aligned on that. And I see this as a compromise. Not everybody wins. The BIA last night at their meeting, where they installed a whole new board as well, it was quite well attended. People weren't jumping for joy, but nor were they, ready to lynch us at that meeting. They seemed, that this was a reasonable compromise. It's for a year. with the understanding that if things, if the wheels fall off the bus, next May or whatever, that the new council could obviously bring this back sooner. But I think this is a fair, balanced approach that's financially responsible, semi-sustainable, I'll paint it as, and I think satisfies a lot of the immediate concerns. And the fact that it doesn't kick into September definitely helps the downtown bounce back over this summer. And then really we're going to see the free December again, which is awesome. I actually wasn't expecting to see that in there. The free December. And then so really this program really kicks into high gear next spring, realistically, when we see the return to hopefully normality by then. And I really think we'll get some good metrics from a town perspective. If I'm around to say something about them, right on. If I'm not, then I feel okay voting for this tonight, and that I see it painted as a win for the town and the residents who have been just crying for some relief from arguably what was a not a well implemented first couple of rounds. So thanks for the staff effort on this, and but you'll have my support on this report tonight.
Thank you, Councillor. Just maybe a bit of clarity. I thought I read in the report that we weren't able to do a 2-hour limit on the meters. Did I misinterpret that, Mr. CAO?
Thank you, Your Worship. The 2-hour limit is possible if you use pay by plate. So that is possible because your plate is registered with the machine. So it would set a 2-hour limit that you would only be able to use once a day. Obviously, if you go with pay and display, your plate isn't registered, there is no limit.
Thank you. Any other questions with respect to, I see Deputy Mayor Ross and then Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Worship. Through you. Just a couple of clarifications, if I could. I'm very happy to see this report. It's a great compromise, as Councillor Gordon said. It's nice that we're able to work this out. It has been, we've all heard the complaints and the comments with regards to the system. I am so happy to see that that app is still available. I'm a big app user, and I just love the idea. I was one of the few that I didn't find a problem with it. I would register before I'd leave the house and pull in, park my car and walk it away. But I appreciate, I have a older mother, and she did have issues with it. So I'm happy that we're able to help her out and the rest of our residents. Now, the questions I have, we're still able to, I understand if it's a pay and display, it's a coin, or we're able to use a debit card or a credit card. Is that correct? I just wanted to verify. I read online the other day that there's a bank in Barrie, believe it or not, that is going cashless. So you're going to have a bank in Barrie that you can't even get cash out of. So at some point, there's not going to, you're only going in for advice or to do investments, but you can't take money out. So at some point, we're maybe a cashless society, and I think COVID. So there is that option, I'm hoping, if you could verify.
Would like that question, Mr. CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. So yes, the machines will take cash. They won't give you any change. We'll make that very clear on the machine. So if you're expecting change to be dispensed, that won't happen. So make sure you do that. It is possible, and I know we had this discussion prior to the meeting, that when you can still use the app to pay for parking, even if we decide to go with pay and display. If the bylaw officer does not see a ticket on your dash, they'll scan your plate. So if you are registered in the system with the app, you won't get a ticket. So both those options remain available, even under the pay and display option. So again, we're trying to make it easier for people to use whatever means they like to access the system for the paid part, right? Obviously, the back lots will continue to be free.
Thank you. Any other follow on, Deputy Mayor? Are you satisfied? Satisfied? Councilor Cunningham.
Thank you, Your Worship. First, I want to also start off by saying thank you so much to staff for really demonstrating that you're listening to council, to the people in the town, to the concerns that were brought to you. Sometimes best practices don't work. Sometimes you really have to do Midland practices, and this report really addresses that it's looking at what are the best practices for Midland, taking into account all that has gone on, all that is happening. And I really want to appreciate you for bringing that forward in this report. You can see a real commitment to delivering what council would like to see based on what we've heard from people in the town. And I know, Mr. Mayor, you thought we would get to this the first time this came to us at council, that you wanted to have this conversation, but I see this would have been hours of work. And so I'm so glad that we passed this back to our staff to come forward with this. That would have been a very long meeting. I don't know if it would have been record breaking, but to get to this level, I think would have been a very long time. I want to also suggest, yes, the compromise I think is fantastic. Being able to repurpose the existing meters, return some and move some to the street on Bayshore, I think is another wonderful way to really keep those back lots free as we make them free again. And so as to item number 1, which I guess we're supposed to be speaking to, these all look very good to me. The free parking 7 days a week in all the downtown parking lots, I think is going to be a real relief for people. I've heard amazing feedback from our merchants downtown about the happiness of people coming into the stores and the increase in traffic in the stores. And so I'd also like to encourage, please tell each other that this is happening, because the more people who know, the more customers we will have in our rejuvenation of our downtown. I think this, I'm glad to see that we have a plan to roll this out with a communications program, because immediately the next day, people were seeing an increase in traffic downtown.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm just going to ask the clerk. I noticed that Councillor Prost is not with us. Is that a technical issue that we're aware of?
I haven't received any messages, so I'm not sure what happened.
Okay, so I'll just make note in the minutes that at this point, it's recognized that Councillor Prost is no longer with us, please. Thank you. And then on a point of clarity, so I have a series of motions here, one which would accept 2A, one which would accept 2B, or not to be. Sorry about that. I have a motion here, 1 to 6, which I'm going to assume should come before the 2A, 2B, or not. Can I just do a show of hands for each of the items? Mr. Campbell, you have a suggestion?
Thank you, Your Worship. The recommendations have been put into separate motions. So yes. The original mover and seconder will be on all 6.
Right.
And a show of hands, and each motion will be signed and carried.
Okay, thank you. Correct. So the vote would be on motions 1 to 6. No. It's one of these situations where you be careful what you ask for. So here we are. We're now Deputy Mayor Ross, Councilor Cunningham are moving and seconding item 1. And so I'm going to, if there are no further comments or questions with respect to item 1 in the main motion, Councilor Gordon.
Excuse me, Councilor Main has his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Councilor Main.
That's okay. See, that's why I should have came down. I apologize.
I recognize Councilor Gordon, and I'll come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
This is something that came up at the BIA meeting last night, and that's just a reminder that the free parking is not overnight parking. So if you're a resident downtown with a car, the free parking doesn't basically give you a free spot to overnight. That's all year, not just the winter prohibition. And the other thing was, and this is really just a courtesy issue, and this will be up to the store and the merchants to manage as they see fit. Obviously, with the town, giving up the revenue from the parking lots, much as we did before, only it was a 3-hour limit. a lot of people led to the moving of the cars, and we had to play the chalk the tires game, and it was really cat and mouse. We're just foregoing all of that this time entirely. But that is going to really rely on the goodness of the employees and the employers to make sure that those premium spaces closest to the stores are left vacant for the users, the customers who you want to attract. So I do, and we can't enforce this. This is just a reminder, and this was brought up at the meeting, that we'd ask that those good spots are left for the customers, and that staff and people that work downtown and live downtown park in the more sort of extreme areas, the back 40, if you will, unless you have mobility issues, of course, just to free up those spots. Because what would be a really tragedy to see is we opened up the free lots, and now all the good spots are camped in all day by people that work downtown who need a parking place. I get it, but when really the intention is to have those spots left open to attract the customers. So not something the town can enforce. I don't think much of us will ever even know if that's happening, but it's just something to be cognizant of, because we don't have any type of policing for how long people park in those lots, except for overnight. So unless I've misread it, I think that's the gist of it. And I just wanted to at least acknowledge that is a risk, and we're asking for the residents and the merchants and the employees' help in that.
Thank you, Councillor. It is first come, first served, but of course, presumably customers come first. And if you're going to be there all day, as Councillor Gordon suggests, you would be courteous of you to park to the rear and allow customers access to and from the businesses. Councillor Main, you wish to ask a question or speak?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. No, I guess as what everyone said, like this is a really good compromise that really addresses a lot of the issues that people have brought forward. We still have paid parking and some regiment for on-street, but return of the free off-street parking will address a lot of the concerns that we heard with employees and whatnot. I just had a question for staff on 2 points on what's the justification towards moving towards 6 days a week on-street paid parking. Historically, we've had just weekdays paid and weekends free. And the second question is around the harbor, and I guess the justification for the premium rate at $1.50, and also if there's any thoughts about softening that rate in the off season or shoulder seasons, because it's going to be weird if we have a paid parking across the street from free parking. People will find free parking very quickly. And one of the comments that people were making is that some of the harbor parking is actually used as a trailhead. And so cycling, going east or west. And so the justification for a higher rate in the off season or the shoulder season is a little bit tricky to kind of manage, and not to overcomplicate things, because we've certainly overcomplicated things as we go, but just thoughts around of that and how we find a solution for the harbor rates that works kind of for every user, all the different user groups. Thank you.
So, Mr. CAO, do you want to field that?
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Councillor Main. Yes, those were very deliberate considerations when you looked at the compromise of offering a majority of the spaces as free. We wanted to try and focus on providing tax relief from non-Midland residents, and certainly some of the feedback we received from various groups was the Saturday is primarily a shopping day for people from outside of Midland. And why not take advantage of people who aren't Midland residents to help contribute to some of the costs associated with the downtown? So that was the main reason, certainly for that. To some of the points that Councillor Gordon made, I think it is important to understand we want to monitor this for 1 year and certainly take a close look at the feedback and certainly the tax relief that this will generate. But we also want to look at the data that we're going to have. You'll see during our budget, we did get the authority to buy some traffic monitoring data, which is in place, which will allow us to really monitor where the traffic is coming from into all areas of Midland, but particularly into the downtown core. We'll be monitoring that. And that'll help us determine where we want to put perhaps different paid options to take advantage of non-Midland residents paying for parking at a reasonable rate. The harbor, there's no question, is one of our most popular parking lots, particularly for visitors that come, that's obvious. The rate that we're charging at the harbor is extremely low for a harbor parking lot of that nature. And, you know, we've compared that to other harbor parking lots, and you can see that it's extremely value priced, if you like, at even the $1.50. But we thought that was a reasonable way to make up a bit of the revenue loss we saw with offering the free parking in most of the back lots. So on those two fronts, let's take advantage of non-Midland residents when they come to visit the downtown to help pay for some of the costs. So that's why the Saturday was introduced. And the slight adjustment on the rate at the harbor, because it's so popular with visitors, is again to take advantage of that to help offset some of the cost.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. Does that satisfy your question, Councilor Main? Thank you. Any further questions for staff on section 1? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? I see none against. That carries. Thank you very much. We now move to item 2, which deals with pay and display versus pay by plate. So I'm going to read the first. I'm going to read option 2A. See if I think I know the outcome of this, so I'm just going to go right to 2A. So this is moved by Deputy Mayor Ross, and again seconded by Councilor Cunningham. That in conjunction with the approval of the related parking system updates and in accordance with the evaluation and implementation details set out in report CSR-2022-48, the pay by plate system be converted to a pay and display system. Comments or questions by council with respect to this item? Councilor Main.
I love this idea. I know Councilor Cunningham had put this forward when we were discussing this last time. That's the one concern that we've heard from people, and people have bemoaned, why didn't you just get the pay and display meters? And here's the opportunity for us to try the system, see if it works. And I guess the question is to staff is, are there any issues with converting in to the pay and display? Obviously, we're gonna have to communicate people that they're gonna have their little receipt visible. But is there any foreseeable issues with the conversion and rollout of this option? Thank you.
Who wants that one? Ms. Grenier, is that one for you?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll take this
Mr.
one.
Dino.
The impacts of pay and display, we've outlined them on page 5, and it is important that we do understand that. And certainly either pay and display or pay by plate are options that staff are more than willing to implement based on council's direction. But if we do go with the pay and display system, we need to acknowledge that receipt, if you're going to use the machine, that receipt must be walked back to your vehicle. So there is, kind of the increased walking. Some people may find that burdensome. I'm not sure, but it is kind of a fact that the receipt must go back to the vehicle. Free time, as we're offering through the system today, so that 15 minutes free time on street and the free time in the back lots, that will not be possible with the pay and display. Your plate is not being registered into the system, so free will not be an option for those machines. There is obviously free back lot parking. So the on-street parking, if we went with pay and display, would be strictly pay. The 2-hour limit, which currently exists on the pay by plate, is only possible because your plate is registered. So once your 2-hour limit is exceeded, you can no longer park in that spot for another 2 hours. That was designed for turnover of customers on that venue, and that would no longer be possible. Additional bylaw enforcement time obviously required because you'd have to monitor the plate, but not so significant. We'd have to stock the machines with rolls of paper, so there's some costs associated with that. But again, it's not a significant cost. I think it really gets down to understanding what we feel the user experience would be, preference, and I think the biggest possible opposition would be the walk back and forth.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. I think it's also important to understand that the machine is capable of understanding license plates as people using the app. Come on forward, Councilor. No problem. Well, welcome back. So, Councilor Cunningham, sorry.
Yes, thank you. I think those are really important points about the pay and display. And I wonder, in looking at the fact that this is changing the parking system and how it will function, whether we can also take this back to the Accessibility Committee for a review of that motion that I made or tried to make earlier around making wheelchair or handicap sticker vehicles exempt from parking fees. So I don't know if that'll need a separate motion or if it can just go back to that committee since there has been a change.
Madam Clerk, any opinion on that?
We can prepare a motion. Councillor Cunningham, if you just want to repeat the wording.
You've turned yourself off there.
Yes, I love having to write motions on the spot because I'm so good at it. So I'd like to move that due to the changes in the parking bylaw, that this bylaw be not referred, no, because if we're approving, I need help.
What about reviewed?
Yeah, it's not referred, it's not deferred.
Let's let the clerk,
Madam Clerk
work
is
on
figuring
this.
stuff
Mr.
out.
Campbell, we'll wait for a minute for Mr. Campbell and the clerk to work on this. So let's park the suggestions for the moment. Thank you. And welcome back to Councillor Prost. I guess she was having technical difficulties, so glad to see you back.
Your Worship, if I may.
Mr. Deneau.
Thank you, Your Worship. To Councillor Cunningham, in the report we do allude to, should Council proceed with the recommendation, that we would want to meet with the Accessibility Committee to discuss the issue of availability of enough spaces in the free zone. So that's certainly the consultation with the Accessible Committee was something that was anticipated through the program. We can obviously expand that to include any considerations around the pay and display if that is an option that we want to include.
Would that satisfy you in lieu of a motion?
Yes, thank you. That consideration, I know staff goes above and beyond when it comes to moving those kinds of things forward. I don't need to put a motion into effect.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, for your effort on that. We'll forego the outcome at the moment and go with the original motion. So Councilor Gordon, please.
Thanks. Just so we can say it, of course, nothing's changed with the free veteran parking, right? So veterans are free to park on street. I mean, obviously they can park in a free lot, but if they want to park on street, that program remains in effect. It wasn't discussed in here, but I think it's just implied that it remains in effect. I just wanted to make sure we said that.
Good point. Thank you. So I'm going to call the question on the motion currently before us. All those in favor? That's unanimous and carries. So pay and display it is. Sorry, I just have to modify some of these things. Next, we have item 3. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Ross and again seconded by Councillor Cunningham, that the current pause on paid parking remain in effect until September 15th, 2022, until all changes can be implemented and communicated to the public. Comments or questions with respect to this part of the motion? Deputy Mayor Ross and then Deputy Mayor Ross. No, I see. You're voting against. Yeah, okay. Councillor May.
I was just going to say, and let it here now be known forward as the summer of fun, AKA free parking downtown Midland until September 15th.
Thank you, Councillor Main. And with that, any further comments or questions? Councillor Gordon.
Maybe we could have some type of roll out the red carpet, welcoming people to the new parking experience downtown. I know that the BIA has been promoting it a lot, but in our workup to the September change, it really might be worth doubling down on our communications about the free parking for what's left of the summer, just the lion's share of it.
Thank you. I see nods from staff. I would also note that out of the BIA meeting last night, they were indicating that they'd like to help support new signage in the parking lots, free parking, etc. So I'm sure they'll be in touch with the check, and looking forward to their participation. So no more comments or questions on this item. I'll call the question. All those in favor? That carries. Item 4 is moved by Deputy Mayor Ross, seconded by Councilor Cunningham, as per the original motion. That staff be directed to cover the estimated lost parking revenue of approximately $260,000 during the paid parking pause, which runs from June 15th to September 15th, 2022, through any available relief funding and or a draw on reserves as recommended in the 2022 year-end report. Comments or questions by council on this item? Councillor Main, Councillor Gordon, Councillor Cunningham.
Oh, I just had a quick question for staff in terms of parking reserves. I'm going to assume that we probably don't have, I know just generally we don't have very robust reserves. We've been trying to put more money aside. Is this something that the parking reserve has capacity to draw from at this time? Thank you.
CFO, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Main. So the parking reserve is definitely not flushed with funds at this time. So it would be other reserve funds that we would draw on. There is also the possibility to have some relief funding through the various programs that we've had, the COVID relief funding, for example. But we would bring that recommendation forward as part of our year-end report sometime in 2023. Thank you.
Councillor Gordon.
Thanks. I mean, I'm not going to vote against this, but the estimated revenues that we were going to make had this system taken off the way it was originally launched were significant revenues. So when we say that, we're going to be estimating the lost parking revenues, it's still a bit of a fantastical number anyway, that either was or wasn't going to come to pass and clearly isn't now. So rather than looking for ways to find 260 grand elsewhere, I mean, I'm always encourage people to look for relief funding somehow. I would just be content to see us not spend $260,000 that would normally be recouped through this hopeful, wishful slush fund from parking, which isn't going to happen now. So I'm not going to say don't look for relief. This magic number that we came up with on how much we were going to make on parking with this new system versus what we used to make historically on the old system, was probably, we shot too high, and I don't want us to fill in this magical void with this arbitrary number. I'd rather see us reduce our spend in some capacity so that we don't have to go looking to make up this lost 260,000 that we probably weren't going to make anyway had this whole system tanked. So that's just my comments on it. I'd like to see us cinch in the belt a little more rather than spend as usual and try and find ways to find the money. Thank you.
Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I would like to address it, because I think we need to be obviously totally transparent with the public on what the impact of the program is. Certainly for the last 2 budget years, $700,000 of relief and $500,000 of relief were provided to the budget through the revenues that would be coming from the parking program. This isn't inconsistent with many municipalities who use parking to help cover their costs. So there's a reasonable expectation to meet those revenues. But this program, there's no question, this was a very, very delicate program to roll out, you know, at the time that it happened. There's no question about that. But there's also no question when you look at our budget, and we've been very transparent through our budget process. We provided more detail than I think has ever been provided in the past. Our reserves need help. Like, we need help to reinforce our reserves. And that was certainly the intent of the program. Introducing a new program that introduces a new fee for things that were free before is difficult. Introducing a program that introduces new technology is difficult. Introducing a new program during a pandemic is difficult. All three were done with this. So there's no question this was really tough to do. Were the expectations of the revenue too high? I think we obviously need to reassess what could be driven by this program, why the numbers come down. But for the last 2 budget years, the tax levy has seen between 2 and 3% tax relief as a result of what we've done. We've met those budgets, and we'll certainly see from our financial results, we've had to tighten our belt to cover the loss. We've had to take advantage of programs that were available by the government to offset those revenues lost. So we've had to recover the loss by managing the budget. We'll continue to do that this year again because we have to manage the loss. But this program, we feel, is a reasonable expectation for a new council to consider for tax relief of the amount that's included, but it won't be to the degree that we've experienced in the last 2 budgets.
Thank you, Mr. Deneau. I have Councilor Cunningham.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things that we have seen shift during this parking program that I think most people are aware of is the shift from parking fees to pay for maintenance and repairs of the parking facilities to it being a tax relief option. And one of the things that I think would be valuable, though I will of course support this item that we recover this piece, what would be valuable is having more direct context between what revenues from the parking program do support, and having that clarity, I think, would be of increasing value in this context of how this rolled out. Not necessarily today, but in the future budget process.
Thank you, Councillor. Did you wish to respond from Mr. Campbell, please?
Yeah, I can answer specifically for 2022, and it was 227,000 was going to the general tax levy relief. The balance of the revenue was going to maintenance, repairs, and staffing costs for enforcement. So that 200,000 was directly 1% in this year's budget if you take out the maintenance and things like that, and asset management.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. I think it's also important to point out that we did approve a budget. The computation in the report is fairly modest in terms of actual occupancy of the total number of parking spots throughout the town. I think that was a reasonable expectation to put into the budget personally. We did approve the budget, and it's one of these things where we're seeing a shortfall, and that's what reserves are for. Any other comments on this particular item? Seeing none, then I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. This item carries. Next, we have item 5, moved by Deputy Mayor Ross, second by Councillor Cunningham. The staff continue to evaluate the ability to generate event-based revenues through paid parking that would result in a benefit to tax relief. Council, questions, comments with respect to this particular item? Councilor,
Your Worship.
Yep.
Thank you. Just curious how that would look. I mean, our large and one big major event is the Butterchar Festival. I guess if we're going to free back lot parking, that there would be some sort of a fee for the day. We'd also have to be mindful of all the vendors and all the different cube vans and trucks coming from all over the place. So we might have a little tag for the vendors or something like that. Just curious of the staff's thoughts about how how they roll this out, and what are some of the fees that they would think would be fair for something like that. Are they looking at a daily rate or an hourly rate type of thing? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think so. I'll hand that to the CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Main. We took a look at this, not extensively. We were just under too much pressure to get our events going for this year, and I think you've seen just the quality of the events and the appetite for people to get back and celebrate in Midland was overwhelming, and we didn't want to disrupt any of that with the planning that would be necessary to implement something that was new. And certainly if you volunteer, and we're always looking for volunteers at our events, a little shout out to our Tall Ships Festival if you're interested. But if you volunteer at one of these events, you'll gain a better appreciation, certainly as I did at the Butter Tart Festival, of the needs around the vendors and certainly the people coming to these events. So I think it's one of those issues where, you know, I'll use the Deputy Mayor's favorite expression, the juice might not be worth the squeeze, in terms of trying to implement something for an event like that and not getting much out of it because of the administration around it. There's a tremendous amount of traffic flow getting in and out of an event like Butter Tart that I'm not sure it's worthwhile, but we don't want to discount the ability to maybe use it for some other events. How much would we charge? We don't know. That's something we'd have to work with. Are we using to the full extent our ability for sponsorships of some of these events? I think all of that needs to be discussed. I think our events are first class. I think we run some of the best events anywhere in this province. I've talked to many of the vendors who came into Butter Tart, and they were so thankful to be able to join you know, the festival this year. They've been waiting years to get into it. They were staying overnight at our hotels, you know, because it's an early start. They were buying gas, they were buying things that they needed. So all of that has supported the economy somewhere to the tune of, I think, $2 million, I think, if not $4 million in economic development provided by Butter Tart. So a long-winded answer to, we want to be careful about using this. It is a tool, you know, that we want to help offset some of the costs we have, but we don't want to lose sight that our events are extremely popular and they provide economic benefit to the town.
Thank you, Mr. Yale. Any other comments or questions with respect to the item? Councilor Cunningham.
Yes, just a quick verification, please, Your Worship. This item, I think it makes sense to always be looking for opportunities to raise additional funds, especially from outside of the town, as people come in and appreciate the amenities that we do have to offer. Is this something that would come back as a staff report for consideration to council in the future?
Mr. Deneau.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Cunningham, yes, it would. It would. You know, we're going to take a close look at certainly all the events that we look at in the town. We're anxious to work with the new BIA that was put in place. Kathy at the chamber is always, you know, anxious to talk about things we can do to help with events around the town. So we're anxious to have those discussions. We certainly want to focus on 4 seasons for Midland. You know, we've got pretty healthy summer season of events. So we want to look at expanding that across the 12 months, and certainly that the impacts on the costs and also the potential revenues we'd have to factor into anything we would do.
Thank you, Mr. Deneau. Any other further comments or questions? Just like to say to Councillor Main that I appreciate him pointing out that our large festival is Butter Tart, but being the optimist that I am, I think we're going to have many more to come, especially since the BIA, the chamber, and cross represented now, and looking forward to some great results out of that. So with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. That carries. The last item in this omnibus package is moved by Deputy Mayor Ross, seconded by Councilor Cunningham, that staff be directed to provide an update to council on the program in September 2023. Comments or questions? Deputy Mayor.
Before we just close off this conversation with regards to parking, I wanted to thank our staff and Mr. Deneau for all the hard work. So Mr. Deneau. Andy. But I just wanted to thank everybody for all the hard work, and you know, it's nice to see the town come together. This is what we're, you know, some days you leave council feeling a little beat up, and today I'm going to leave feeling quite good about some of the decisions we made today. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And just to further that, thanks to the residents for their input. As numerous as the inputs were, we were listening, we did act, and I think it's a fair assumption to say, fair statement to say that, as Councilor Gordon pointed out, not everybody's happy with all of it, but I think we can all be happy with most of it. So congratulations to all. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. That carries.
If I may, Your Worship.
Please.
I just obviously want to refer all of that positive comments from council and the deputy mayor to staff and to the community. Obviously, this is you know, a lot of us have been developing policy for a long time, and this is a tricky one. This was without question a very tricky one for the reasons that I mentioned. But I thought staff did a tremendous job because we were listening, and I know some people felt that wasn't occurring, but I can assure you we were listening all the time, and we were taking direction all the time. It was difficult to find something that struck that right balance, but we did hear everyone, every individual who called, who was concerned about the tax relief, was concerned about the usability of the system. We heard you. We think this recommendation provides that balance, and certainly look forward to the direction of council.
Thank you, Mr. Deneau. Next item on the agenda is a motion moved by Councilor Prost, seconded by Councilor Main. The bylaw 2022-41. I'm going to put my glasses on here. Can't quite see this. Being a bylaw to appoint Lindsay Barron as Chief Financial Officer Treasurer and to repeal bylaw 2020-29 be passed and enacted. All those in favor? Thank you. That is unanimous. Congratulations. Welcome officially to the team. That's a good question. What would happen? Yeah. Moved by Councilor McGinn, seconded by Deputy Mayor Ross, beg your pardon, that bylaw 2022-42 being a bylaw to adopt the proceedings of the special meeting of council with closed session held July 13th, 2022 be passed and enacted. All those in favor? Thank you. That was unanimous again. Finally, moved by Councilor Cunningham and seconded by Councilor Olszewski, that this special meeting of council with closed session adjourn at 6:18 p.m. All in favor? That too is unanimous. Thank you, council. Thank you, staff. It's a beautiful evening. I'm sure we're all anxious to get home and enjoy our family and the weather. Thanks for coming in today, and moving the yardstick that far down the road was quite an accomplishment. So thanks for that. Have a great evening.
Good night from Fort Albany. This hybrid model works. Thank you very much.